The night before my wedding, I cheated on my fiancé. I didn't plan for it to happen, but I won't lie, it did, and it haunts me to this day. Jake and I had been together for 4 years. He was my rock, my best friend. We met in college, and our relationship was easy, steady, predictable. Maybe that was part of the problem. I loved him, but I can't say there was ever fire between us. Everything was just comfortable. We decided to get married because it made sense. Everyone said we were perfect for each other. The night before the wedding, my friends threw me a small bachelorette party. Nothing wild, just dinner, drinks, and dancing. At least that was the plan. We ended up at this upscale bar downtown. That's where I saw him, Ethan. We hadn't spoken in years, but I recognized him instantly. He was my ex. The one who broke my heart back when I was barely 20. The one I never really got over. He approached me at the bar with that same smirk that had always driven me crazy. "Wow, Emily. You look different," he said, eyes scanning me like he was trying to piece together the girl I used to be with the woman standing in front of him now. We talked for a while, about life, about how he'd moved to Chicago, how I was getting married tomorrow. He congratulated me, but there was something in his tone that didn't feel genuine. I told myself to walk away, to rejoin my friends. But instead, I stayed. 1 drink turned into 2. 2 turned into a walk outside. We stood in the warm night air, the city lights blurring around us. He leaned in closer, and for a second, I thought I'd pull away. I didn't. His lips touched mine, and suddenly, I was 19 again, reckless and consumed by him. We ended up in his hotel room. I don't need to go into details. You know how these stories go. When it was over, I lay beside him, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Guilt hit me like a wave. I thought about Jake. About our wedding. About the vows I was supposed to say in less than 12 hours. I left Ethan's room before sunrise. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends. Not Jake. I plastered on a smile for the wedding, said my vows like nothing had happened. I married Jake. For a while, I thought I could move on, bury it deep. But secrets have a way of poisoning everything. I started pulling away from Jake. He noticed. We fought more. He asked if I was unhappy, and I lied, telling him I was just stressed from work. The truth came out 2 years later. We were arguing, and in a moment of weakness, I told him everything. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just stared at me like I was a stranger. That was the last time we spoke in person. The divorce papers came a month later. I haven't seen Ethan since that night. Sometimes I wonder if I would have done things differently if I hadn't run into him. Maybe. Maybe not. What I do know is that I'll carry that moment with me forever, the night I destroyed the life I thought I wanted. After the divorce, I spent a long time trying to figure out who I really was. I couldn't blame everything on Ethan. Sure, he was a catalyst, but the cracks in my relationship with Jake had been there long before that night. I had been living a life I thought I was supposed to want. The perfect fiancé, the perfect wedding, the perfect plan for the future. But it wasn't mine, not really. I moved out of the house Jake and I shared and rented a small apartment on the other side of town. It was quiet. Too quiet. For the first few months, I spent my nights in a haze, working late, drinking too much, barely sleeping. I kept replaying that night with Ethan over and over. Not just the betrayal but the feeling it gave me, the wild, dangerous thrill that had been missing from my life with Jake. That scared me because deep down, I knew that wasn't sustainable. But I didn't know what was. Therapy helped. At first, I resisted it. I thought, I don't need to sit on some couch and cry to a stranger. But my best friend Sarah insisted. She'd been there for me through the whole mess, and one day she just said, "Emily, you've got to stop running from yourself." My therapist, Dr. Jenkins, didn't let me get away with excuses. She asked me the hard questions. Why did I stay with Jake for so long when I wasn't truly happy? Why did I crave that rush with Ethan? Why did I think I didn't deserve more than comfortable? The answers weren't easy. I had spent my whole life being a people pleaser. I did what was expected of me, went to college, got a stable job, found a good guy. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to listen to my own needs. I realized that cheating on Jake wasn't just about Ethan. It was about me screaming for something real, something alive, even if it was destructive. About a year after the divorce, I bumped into Jake at a coffee shop. He was with someone, a woman with warm eyes and an easy laugh. I could see it in the way they moved together. He was happy. Truly happy. He saw me, too. There was a moment of awkwardness before he smiled and nodded. I smiled back, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. We didn't speak, but that silent acknowledgement said enough. He had moved on. And I was finally starting to do the same. As for Ethan, I never reached out to him, and he never reached out to me. In a way, I think it was better that way. He wasn't my answer. He was a mirror, reflecting everything I had been too afraid to face. I stopped romanticizing that night after a while. It wasn't some grand, tragic love story. It was a mistake, plain and simple. Now, 3 years later, I'm in a better place. I'm not married. I'm not even dating right now. But for the first time in my life, I'm content being on my own. I've traveled. I've started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I'm learning who I am without anyone else defining me. Sometimes I still think about Jake, though. I wonder if he ever thinks about me. Probably not. And that's okay. We were two people who weren't meant to last. He deserved better, and now I know that I do too. Life isn't neat. It's messy, filled with mistakes and regrets. But I've learned that those moments don't define you unless you let them. I've forgiven myself. And in that forgiveness, I've found something I never thought I'd have again, peace. A few months ago, I got a call from someone I hadn't heard from in years, Ethan. The number popped up on my phone out of nowhere while I was getting ready for bed. I stared at it for a solid minute before I answered. "Emily," he said, his voice hesitant, like he wasn't sure I'd pick up. "Hey. It's been a while." Hearing his voice hit me like a shock to the system. Memories of that night flooded back, but I kept my tone steady. "Yeah, it has. What's going on?" He hesitated, and for a second, I thought he might say something sentimental, like how he couldn't stop thinking about me. But that's not what happened. He told me he was moving back to town for work. He'd taken a job at a firm downtown and just wanted to reach out. "I thought maybe we could grab coffee sometime," he added, his voice casual but with a hint of something unspoken. I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to hang up right then and there. The other part, the curious, reckless part, wanted to see him, to confront what had been left unresolved between us. In the end, I agreed. "Sure," I said. "Coffee sounds fine." We met a week later at a quiet cafe near the riverfront. I arrived early, nervous but determined to keep my guard up. When he walked in, he looked almost the same confident stride, same disarming smile. But there was something different in his eyes. Maybe time had changed him, too. We exchanged small talk at first, work, family, the usual catching up stuff. But eventually, the conversation shifted. "I never really apologized for what happened," he said, stirring his coffee. "I knew you were getting married, and I should have kept my distance. It wasn't all on you, I replied. I made my choices. You didn't force me to do anything. He nodded, but I could tell there was more he wanted to say. After a long pause, he asked, "Do you ever regret it?" I thought about that question a lot over the years. For a while, I did regret it. But now, with time and distance, my feelings were more complicated. I regret how much it hurt Jake, I said honestly. But I don't regret what it taught me about myself. I needed to face the fact that I was living a lie. That night forced me to wake up. Ethan leaned back in his chair, absorbing my words. I get that. I've had my own wake-up calls. We talked for hours after that. It wasn't romantic or nostalgic. It was two people finally finding closure. By the time we left, I felt lighter, like I'd finally let go of a ghost that had haunted me for too long. He walked me to my car, and for a moment, we stood there in silence. There was no tension, no lingering attraction. Just a quiet understanding. Take care of yourself, Emily, he said softly. You too, Ethan. And that was it. We went our separate ways, and I knew we wouldn't see each other again. I didn't need to. That chapter of my life was finally closed. Since then, I've felt freer than ever. The guilt that used to weigh me down is gone. I'm not defined by my past anymore. I've learned to make peace with my mistakes, to see them as part of my journey rather than something to be ashamed of. I don't know what the future holds, but for now, I'm happy just living in the present. Maybe one day I'll fall in love again. Maybe I won't. Either way, I'll be okay. Because for the first time in my life, I know who I am, and that's more than enough. About a week after meeting Ethan, I found myself sitting alone on my apartment balcony, sipping wine and watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in years, there was no noise in my head, no guilt, no shame, no endless loops of regret. Just peace. It hit me then how much I had grown since that night. I had faced my demons, accepted my flaws, and come out stronger. Jake's face drifted into my mind as it often did, but this time it wasn't painful. I silently wished him well, wherever he was, with whoever he loved now. We were never meant to be forever. He was a chapter in my story, and I was one in his. The next day, Sarah and I grabbed brunch. She asked me if I'd heard from Ethan again. When I said no, she grinned. Good, she said. That door needed to stay shut. I laughed and agreed. The person I used to be, the one chasing validation and clinging to impossible ideas of love, was gone. I didn't need anyone to
Ведь всего-то на минутку отошел, чтобы в гостинице со скуки не помереть. Ой, извините. Похоже, это все карма. Брысь с дороги.
I spend my time doing what makes me feel alive, painting, hiking, spending time with people who matter. I'm not afraid of the future or of being alone anymore. The road that led me here was painful, yes, but it was necessary. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: healing doesn't come from running away. It comes from standing still, facing your truth, and owning every part of your story, the good, the bad, and everything in between. So here I am, a little bruised but whole. Finally, I'm at peace with who I am. And for the first time in my life, that's enough.